The director of the Center of Remote Sensing at Boston University is a native of Egypt who taught at Ain Shams University in Cairo. He's affiliated with NASA as principal investigator for planetary geology and ambassador to the United Nations for Third World Academy of Science. Our own Evelyn Menconi speaks with her guest, Dr. Farouk El-Baz.
You may remember that 2 years ago we did a timeline of famous Arab American immigrants, and you may remember seeing this picture. Today we have Professor Farouk El-Baz right here with us to talk about his wonderful career in geology, space, remote sensing, and so many things that I don't know where to begin. But let's begin back where you were born in Egypt. Tell me a little bit about your birthplace.
So you want to go back that far? Well, I was born in a little town called Zagazig. Looks like zigzag misspelled. And that is in the northeast part of the Nile Delta. And then about 2 years later, my father, who was a teacher on one of the schools there, had moved to Dumyat, which is in English called Damietta, a town that is right on the coast of the Mediterranean.
No wonder you love the sea.
That is right. And so I lived my boyhood in this Dumyata. And then after finishing the primary school, the family moved to the vicinity of Cairo. And my mother lived there ever since.
Tell me, how did your interest in geology begin?
When I went to the School of Science in Egypt, I really went there not by choice. When I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to be one of the best surgeons in the world, maybe a brain surgeon or something really fantastic. And my grade at high school did not allow me to go to a medical school. And in Egypt at the time, you did not really have a choice. A group of people would look at your marks in all of the different courses and decide where you should go. So they gave me one of two choices, either the dental school or the School of Science. I didn't want to be a dentist, so I said, no, I'll go see what the School of Science has to offer. I went there and I asked the people at the School of Science about the courses they teach there and what one can specialize therein. They told me it is chemistry and physics and mathematics and botany and zoology and geology. I asked, what is geology? So I had not known what that geology was at the time. They told me, oh, these are the people that collect rocks from the mountains. I said, aha, that's what I would like to have. During my school years, the early years, I was a member of Kashafa, which is the Boy Scouts. And they had very much enjoyed outings in the deserts and things like that. And after going to a place and knowing where it is with the Boy Scouts, I would go later by myself, sometimes take my two younger brothers and show them where we had been and things like that. So I knew that going out in the mountains and collecting rocks was something for me.
Oh, that's marvelous. Now, where did you go to prepare for all of the different kinds of jobs that you're doing in remote sensing? You must have gone to some very special schools.
The basic education at the Ain Shams University was really the platform where I started from. I launched my career based on the education that I received at this Ain Shams University in Cairo, Egypt. I was very lucky in that all of my teachers were wonderful teachers, and they had been, almost all of them, had been educated in the West, in England, in Germany, in the United States, and so on. And I thought I had a very fine education. So when I came here later for a master's and PhD in the United States, all through my graduate work here, I never really felt that I needed any more basics than what I had at Ain Shams University.
Oh, that's a nice plus for Ain Shams. Yeah. Well, you know, I just don't quite know where to begin, but I think we kind of know you best with your association with the moon.
Yes.
So let's start there.
That's a good place to start, because in the year 1967, I joined the Apollo program as a geologist with a company called Bellcom, which was part of Bell Telephone Laboratories. And the company was working as an advisor, a consultant to NASA headquarters. At the time, we were beginning to prepare for the Apollo missions to the moon. So this was a little over 2 years before Neil Armstrong first stepped on the moon. And during these 2 years, it was basically a job of selecting landing sites.
That's what you're a specialist in.
Yes. And
that's what you had to brief the astronauts.
Yeah. And so the basic issue was, if you look at the moon, and maybe we can look at a slide looking at the whole moon. Now in this picture of the moon, we can see dark areas and white areas.
Right.
These dark areas are what Galileo Galilei had called the Maria, because he likened them to the seas on Earth. And then the very bright, the light areas, he called them terra, to compare them to the uplands or the highlands or the land on Earth. And now when we look at these features close up with photographs, we begin to interpret what we see in these photographs, and we begin to figure out the physical nature of the area, and whether the area is flat or whether it is the surface is inclined like that, from the amount of sun reflection on the surface itself. Because if it's away from the sun, you will see shadows. If it is looking at the sun, you will see a very, very bright terrain. And if it is absolutely flat, you get a mixture in between. So we started figuring the flatness of the terrain this way, and figuring the smoothness of the terrain by the amount of blocks strewn about it.
The best landing sites.
To pick up the best landing sites. And from there, we went into the training of the astronauts in geology and in photography. And if we look at this picture now of an astronaut walking on the surface of the moon, we see that the astronaut is carrying scientific instruments on both hands. He's walking away from the place where the lunar module landed to collect samples for us and to take pictures of the terrain on the surface of the moon away from the landing point, because we did not really want to investigate just the immediate vicinity of the landing site. We wanted to look at as far away from where he landed as you possibly can. And in the early missions, they had to do that on foot. On the later, in Apollo 14, they had a cart, a pull cart. And then on Apollo 15, 16, and 17, they actually had a dune buggy, a jeep, which they drove on the moon.
All right. Now, Apollo 15 is the very interesting one. This next slide talks about Apollo 15, and
Yes.
you have some of the conversation there.
Yes, a very interesting event on Apollo 15 was when the astronaut Alfred Worden spoke some words in Arabic, and Arabic became...
Marhaba.
Yes.
What did he say to you?
He said, Marhaba, Ahl al-Ard, min Endeavor, ilaykum salam.
Hello, people of the earth,
Yes,
from Endeavor.
which is the name of the spacecraft.
Right. Peace unto you.
Yes.
Oh, beautiful.
And
That must have been music to your ears.
very much so. It was
You
not...
love your background,
Yes.
I can tell.
It was not music to the ears of Mission Control Center, by the way.
Oh,
They
no,
didn't
it
know what was
hadn't-
happening there.
Yeah, it hadn't fouled up there for a minute.
That is true. And this would make Arabic the only language that was spoken from the moon, in addition
Besides
to
English.
English. Yes.
This next slide is one of my favorites, and I'll tell you, I'm always so happy that when we can tell people about our wonderful background in Arab science.
Yes.
And I guess you've shared this with the whole world. Tell us about this.
All of the surface features of the moon are named after great scientists and contributors to the knowledge of astronomy and the knowledge of the moon and the Earth-Moon system. And if you go back far enough in history, you find that our forefathers, the Arab scientists, had contributed a major part in the understanding of the relationship between the Earth and the Sun, and the Earth and the planets, and the position of the stars, reading of the stars, and mathematics, and all kinds of sciences were developed during the heyday of the Arabs, or the Arab civilization. And I became a member of the committee that was responsible for naming surface features of the moon, which is the International Astronomical Union. Within this union, there is a group that is called the Working Group for Lunar Nomenclature, that is naming the moon. And I was the only foreign member, so to speak, and I naturally brought to the attention of the committee the names of great contributors to our sciences and the civilization that we live in today. And they agreed to the recommendations, and as we see on the slide, there are at least 18 Arab names of people like Al-Bayruni, Al-Farabi, Abu al-Fida, Al-Khwarizmi, and many more. In addition to that, actually, by the time when we were through, there were 32 Arab names on the moon.
Oh, I'm delighted.
Yes.
I'm delighted.
Both on the near side and the far side of the moon.
I knew from reading about your past work that you've done a lot in the desert, and you're still working on desert study.
Yes.
Can you tell us show us some of the slides of some of your work in that?
Yeah. Before we look at some of the pictures, the reason that I started looking at the deserts of the Earth was really very funny, because we came to it kind of from the back door. After the moon missions, we started planning for pictures of the planet Mars. And some of the pictures of the planet Mars reminded me of the pictures or of areas that I had seen pictures of in the Egyptian desert. So I started myself saying, aha, so we now have a planet that has wind-blown features, very much like what we see in the Western Desert in Egypt. And I started trying to figure out what is it that we know about the desert in Egypt, or the deserts of the world for that matter, so that we can better interpret the photographs that were taken of the planet Mars. I realized that we really know so very little about the desert of the Earth, and from there began an interest and a concerted effort to go after more knowledge about the desert of the Earth.
Because it's always changing, isn't it?
Very much so. So if we now look at this slide, which is really a photograph of the whole Earth taken from the moon.
Is that the Arab world?
The whole Arab world, we can see it. From Mauritania in the west, all the way through Morocco, Algeria, and Libya, and Tunisia, and so on, all the way through Egypt. You can see the Red Sea, and we cross the Red Sea when you get to see all of the Arabian Peninsula, and go up to see Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq, and the Arabian Gulf states. We can see here that the whole Arab world is a single geographic unit. In many ways, geologically speaking, whatever happens in any one part of that world affects the others. For example, the dunes that we can find in the shores of Lake Chad begin their journey in the Western Desert in Egypt, over 1,500 miles away. The dust storms that affect Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Sharjah and Doha, Qatar, begin their journey a little bit south of Mosul in Iraq. The dunes that we find now in the empty quarter in Saudi Arabia begin their journey in Wadi Rum in southeast Jordan. So any event in any part of the Arab world affects a vast area in the Arab world. And that's really a very interesting thing to find out. And now if we concentrate a little on the Western Desert in Egypt, on the next slide we can see a mosaic of Landsat images, 65 photographs of all of Egypt. And in here we can see the Red Sea on the right, this black body on the right, and the Mediterranean up on top. And then we can see the red color is all the vegetation around the Nile. Everything else that we see is pure desert. And when we have a pure desert like that, where there is absolutely no vegetation, then we find that the wind is king. The wind rains. It picks up the sand grains and makes magnificent shapes by erosion, and also deposits sands in the forms of dunes. And these dunes move constantly.
And this next slide, there's some encroachment there. These
Yes.
dunes are really taking over.
Quite a bit of encroachment. We can see this one here is a dune crossing a road, and that would render the road totally useless. And on the next one, we can see a similar situation, but that's not a road anymore. Here is a house. Yes, so it's a little village that. And one of the important things that I meant to say by studying the desert in there is that all of this motion and all of the movement of sand is predictable, because we know where the sand is and we know where the prevailing wind directions are, and we could calculate this and we can figure out exactly when these dunes are going to be in what year.
I recall pictures of you with President Sadat
Yes.
of Egypt. You did a lot of work in that area?
Yes. In 1978, President Sadat had intentionally wanted to expand agriculture in the desert.
So
And
you're looking for water.
yeah, so he came to me and he actually appointed me as science advisor. I was at the time working with the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. And for 3 years, I helped President Sadat design a plan for desert reclamation and increase of agriculture in the Western Desert in Egypt, and figuring out what do we do with the Sinai and things like that. And a lot of very good programs began or were initiated then.
Dr. El-Baz, this is so interesting. I just wish we had more time, but we're going to have to leave part of it for the next segment of our show.
It's delightful to be here.
You know, when I was reading my BU Alumni Today newspaper, I read an article about what you were doing with pyramids, and I was just amazed. I said, archaeologists must love the kinds of things that you're doing. Now, you're the director of the Center for Remote Sensing,
That is correct.
and this has something to do with looking into places that we don't ordinarily see, like
Yes.
the seal pits beside the pyramid.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Okay. Remote sensing is studying without touching or looking from a distance. Like, for instance, if you go to a doctor and he takes an X-ray of your chest, he is really investigating your health with remote sensing.
Looking on the inside.
Looking on the inside with remote sensing, he's not touching you, but he's seeing the condition inside without affecting you. And so remote sensing is that. And it can vary from looking at the Earth from space, or looking at the Earth from a balloon or an aircraft, or coming around and looking underneath the ground with a ground-penetrating radar or a magnetometer or a seismometer or any one of these instruments. So we are now applying all of these so-called remote sensing techniques to archaeology. The very first effort was to get this most advanced of remote sensing technology and apply it to the oldest part of our culture, near the pyramid of Khufu in Giza, which is 4,600 years old. And the situation was that there was a chamber. You may recall it was opened in 1954.
Right. There was a boat.
There was a boat inside.
All packed up.
Yes, all disassembled with bunches of wood from each side of the boat that are tied together with rope.
For use in the afterlife.
For use in the afterlife. Or the archaeologists actually contest some of that, because some of them say it was actually used to carry the body of Pharaoh westward.
Oh.
Yeah, so actually it was a funerary. Some archaeologists believe it was a funerary aspect that was already used. Others say, no, it's supposed to be used in the afterlife. And others say, no, it's just symbolic. It's supposed to carry the soul of Pharaoh into the sky with the sun god Ra. So there's quite a bit of discussion as to what these boats mean. Basically because there are so many inscriptions of these boats in ancient Egyptian tombs. And many of them show a king carrying a boat in hand and pushing it upwards toward the sun.
Wow.
Yeah, so there is a
So
whole...
that's why it's all disassembled.
That's true.
Oh.
So that you can put it together and then take it over, whether you're riding on the Nile or going up to the sky. it is yours to...
There were two pits, right?
There were two. They opened one.
And this is by Khufu, the pyramid.
Yes, the builder of the Great Pyramid, which to the English it became Cheops through the writings of the Greeks, through Herodotus, called Khufu. He called them Cheops, so now the name in the West is known as Cheops. So if we look at the slides, we can see the Great Pyramid with a building right at its base, and that is the boat museum, in which the boat that was found in 1954 is displayed.
On exhibit.
Yes, on exhibit, yeah. Tourists can go and see it today. It's a beautiful, magnificent thing, 144 feet long, just a magnificent, beautiful boat. And if we look at the next slide, we're now investigating the sealed pit, the one that has not been opened, and we're looking at it by ground-penetrating radar. This instrument in my hand on the ground sends radar rays towards the ground, and these radar rays are reflected back to the instrument, and we see all of the reflections that give us indications of what the subsurface might look like. So we can get a very good feeling of what the shape of the chamber is and what the profile of its contents are like.
But you actually were able to look right down in there, weren't
That's
you, and
right.
take photographs.
Yes, after we figured out what the shape is, we selected a site to make a drill hole, and we enlisted the efforts of Black & Decker Company to make us a special drill, and that drill had an airlock to separate the atmosphere outside from inside.
So no foreign air would get in there.
Exactly, because one of the intentions, our intentions was to also sample the air inside,
I see.
to see how the atmosphere of the Earth may have changed if it was hermetically sealed. And then we inserted a camera after we drilled through the 62.5 inches of limestone. And next slide, we can see the
Chamber?
the chamber. Yes, we're looking now westward towards the end of the pit, and we can see on the bottom the dark stuff is all we see are all the disassembled wood, and the little white pieces that we see on top of the wood there are pieces of mortar from between the blocks that had fallen off the roof. And so the test was very highly successful. And next slide.
You're working with the National Geographic
That is
Society
correct.
on this?
Yes, and actually, and this what we see right now on the screen is on the left there is Bill Garrett, who is the editor of the National Geographic, who came to Egypt naturally to be with us during the revelations of what is inside the pit, and everybody was certainly very happy that everything worked as clockwork. It proved the applications of remote sensing to the science of archaeology.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, I understand that the Ramesses II exhibit is coming to the Science
Yes.
Museum, and I understand that some of your work is in connection with this exhibit that's going to be traveling
Yes.
to different areas. And so we come to the remote sensing part.
Yes, and our continuation after this, the boat pit project, this is definitely going to be one of the great events in the Boston area. The visit of the great
looking
pharaoh.
forward to it.
Yes, the visit to Boston by the great pharaoh. Himself, he is believed to be one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. He ruled Egypt for 67 years. So when he died, he was almost 100 years. He was 90-some years.
And his wife was Nefertari?
That is right. And most people know the name Nefertiti.
Yes.
And this one is not Nefertiti, it is Nefertari. The only common thing to their names is the part Nefer, which means beauty.
Oh.
Yeah, Nefertiti means the beautiful one. Nefertari means self-generating beauty.
Oh.
Yeah, and the work that we're doing related to Nefertari was really to study the paintings in her tomb. It is one of the most beautiful tombs in ancient Egypt, and unfortunately there was quite a bit of deterioration in the wall paintings, and the tomb had been closed for 50 years. So we started to study what this deterioration might be due to, and therefore what ways can we apply to fix some of this deterioration, so that the Egyptian Antiquities Organization would be able to open the tomb for tourists. So this is the objective, so that everybody can see this magnificent beauty.
And you have, how were these pictures taken?
The first step was the picture that we will see on the screen right now, which is taken by a Landsat satellite flying 570 miles above the Earth.
Amazing.
And here we see the Nile River as a winding little black line there, surrounded on either side by the vegetation, which is in this particular picture looks red. On the right side of the vegetation there we see the Luxor airport, and on exactly in the center of the picture we see the town of Luxor. On the west bank of the Nile is a hill, and this hill is the one that the ancient Egyptians put the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. What they wanted to do, they were also good site selection people, because what they selected was a place that is high, dry, and close by. It is high so that the flood water of the Nile would not reach it. Dry, it is in desert-like conditions, not in the vegetation. And close by so they can walk to it and come back easily. And as a matter of fact, this is the best place in Egypt for that. The part where the Queen Nefertari's tomb is, and we'll look at the next slide, we're looking at the entrance of Nefertari's tomb. And there is a gentleman, an old gentleman there standing right at the door of the Queen Nefertari's tomb. And as we enter inside the tomb, we can see the magnificent colors of the paintings on the next slide, where we can see the goddesses on either side of an entrance to one of the antechambers there, just the reds and the blues and the greens, and the ancient Egyptians have used beautiful colors. And the ancient Egyptians used natural rock and minerals, which they crushed and then applied to these things. They put a little binding medium, which is either gum arabic or egg whites, to bind the powdered rock and mineral and then apply it to the paintings. And you can see the little spots down on the bottom and up on the ceiling, and this is where this deterioration is, which we were studying. And on the next slide we can see one of the conservators that's on the team applying a little strip of Japanese paper to hold back some of the painting, because we had recommended that some emergency restoration be instituted right away to keep things intact on the wall, and out of fear that some of these paintings might fall off.
This is certainly going to be wonderful for the archaeologists and conservators, as well as the environmentalists. Very
much so. So it really is a very fine thing for me personally to have worked on the space program for 20 years, and then take some of that knowledge and apply it back to...
So many wonderful side benefits to the mission.
Very much so.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know, I can't thank you enough for sharing this all with us. But before we close, I'd love to have a little bit about your family. You come from a remarkable family in Egypt. You have a remarkable family here. Can you tell us a little bit about your family? I know your brother because years ago he came to Harvard Law School. I think he got his degree in international relations there. Yes. And every so often I see him on TV. He's foreign advisor to the... Mubarak, President Mubarak.
He's Deputy Foreign Minister and advisor to the President on political affairs.
And you have several other members of your family.
Oh, yes, we are
very remarkable positions.
Well, I'm one of 9, so it's a very large family. And most of them still are in Egypt. There are some living abroad. Another brother of mine also lives here in St. Louis, and the sister is married and living in Geneva with her husband, who is also a diplomat. But the rest are in Egypt.
You have 4 daughters and a wife here.
In here, yes, of course. In this area, yes, we have.
And I'm very interested in your mother.
Yes.
Because I understand that she kind of stayed close to her home most of her life.
Yes.
But then she came to the States. And she was at a very special place in 1975.
Yes.
She came to the celebration of the landing.
Yes, there was a specific celebration, which was also coincided with the launch of the Apollo-Soyuz mission. And on that mission, I was the principal investigator for Earth observations and photography. And both the director of the Kennedy Space Center and the director of that Apollo-Soyuz mission were all friends of mine from the Apollo years. And so they told me both, your mother is coming, so bring her over to Cape Kennedy and tell us when you're coming, so we'll get you a limousine and we'll give you the red carpet treatment. So I said, all right, and we did. And they said, and then we'll come out first up to the director's office and we will give you coffee before you make the tour. So we did, and we had a nice coffee with them. But then the event began, because my mother, having not seen anything at all, she was so fascinated by the whole thing, and she began to ask questions. They were so simple questions, coming to the guts of the issues. But the answers were not as easily coming from these two. They kept on calling help from their engineers and the directors of this and that to answer her questions, absolutely. And they became fascinated with the kinds of questions that she asked, and we had to move. There was supposed to be half an hour for coffee. We had to move to models to show her what the situation is, and we moved to the operations room with the launch, and the group that is answering questions became bigger and bigger, and that went on right through lunch until 5:30 during that day. It was beautiful. It was just unbelievable.
How proud she must be of all of you, and how proud you are of her.
Yeah.
And how proud we are of you. And we thank you so much for this wonderful work, and thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you. It's delightful to be here.
Oh, I just...
Okay.
You are...